Welcome to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't, a podcast dedicated to helping you create the relationship you truly want.
How to thrive in relationships when chronic illness changes everything. If you or someone you love is navigating chronic illness inside a relationship, this episode is for you. And even if you're not personally facing a health challenge right now, this conversation matters because at some point, almost every relationship will encounter stress, illness, aging, loss, or caregiving in some form. The question is not whether challenges will come, it's how we learn to face them together while protecting the relationship itself. Living with a chronic health condition can change every part of a relationship. Communication, intimacy, emotional connection, family roles, finances, even the way couples imagine their future together. Whether it's autoimmune disease, chronic pain, cancer, diabetes, infertility, mental health struggles, or invisible illnesses, the emotional weight doesn't just affect the person diagnosed. It impacts both people in the relationship. And yet, so many couples feel completely unprepared for how deeply illness can reshape love and partnership. One of the hardest parts is that chronic illness often creates an ongoing state of uncertainty. Plans change. Energy fluctuates. One partner may begin to feel more like a caregiver than a romantic partner, while the other struggles with guilt, shame, frustration, fear of becoming a burden. Over time, couples can quietly drift into survival mode, managing appointments, medication, stress, and exhaustion, while emotional closeness slowly gets pushed aside. What makes this even more complicated is that many chronic conditions are invisible to the outside world. People may look fine while privately battling pain, fatigue, anxiety, depression, or debilitating symptoms. That disconnect can leave couples feeling isolated and misunderstood, not only by friends and family, but sometimes by each other. And when emotional needs go unspoken for too long, resentments, loneliness, and disconnection can quietly build beneath the surface. Today's conversation is really about redefining what thriving looks like inside a relationship when health challenges are a part of daily life. And this is the first time I've covered this topic in 11 and a half years of podcasting, and I think it's really important. Thriving may not mean perfection or constant positivity. It may mean learning how to stay emotionally connected during difficult times, how to communicate honestly without blame, how to maintain intimacy when bodies and energy levels change, and how to create a partnership built on resilience instead of performance. The key is learning how to adapt together rather than turning against each other because of stress. I'm especially excited for today's guest. We're talking with an expert who deeply understands the intersection between chronic health conditions, emotional well-being, and relationship dynamics. Amy Kurtz is a certified health coach, patient advocate, and speaker dedicated to empowering patients to reclaim agency over their physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Amy has been featured on Oprah Daily, Good Morning America, the Boston Globe, and more. Her first book, Kicking Sick, your go-to guide for thriving with chronic health conditions, was named by Lena Dunham as one of her top 10 desert island books of all time in New York Magazine. In it, Amy shares her own journey of living with chronic health conditions and provides a roadmap to help readers manage debilitating conditions and live fully. Due out from Hatchetti in June 2026. Amy's second book, But You Look Fine, Trapped in the Hell Between Sick and Well, and How to Break Free. Thanks for being here, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me. Wow, that was quite an introduction.
A quote that stood out to me in the foreword of your book, written by Dr. Galland, was this quote, "Illness can change us, and when severe or chronic, can change our concept of who we are. We become patients, a term derived from the Latin verb patior." Well, sounded more French than Latin. I did take Latin in high school. That's how old I am.
I do.
Oh my goodness, you're not as old as me. Which means to suffer. Would you share more with my audience about how navigating the labyrinth of pain and illness changes us?
I love this question so much, and I love his foreword so deeply. I think anybody who's listening who's ever experienced chronic disease will feel so validated by his words. And there's no part of you that doesn't change when you're affected by a health challenge. It literally changes everything in your entire life. Like everything as you know it to be changes completely. The axis on which everything function changes. And if it's severe, that affects all of your relationships, your relationship with yourself, your thrust into going from who you were and where you saw your life going into a completely different universe where for me, I always felt like, well, I'll just get right back to it. I'll just get right back there once this is over. I'll get back there. I'll get back there. And in my case, which is extreme, but not very unheard of, especially when it comes to Lyme disease, the cruise ship had left. Nothing was where I left it. The horse was gone. And in society, we have this expectation like you're either sick or you're well and you should just get over it and be better. But for me, that just was not the case. And everything about who I was in the world was different than what I thought my path was going to be. And so when you're in the throes of a chronic or acute condition, you go from being who you were to being a patient. And that changes everything. And it's totally different than the plans that you had for yourself. So there's no part of your identity that goes untouched from an experience like that.
I think that's absolutely true. There's really no question about it. And I think it's not something we talk about enough. I think people, it's kind of like death. People don't know what to say. And I think it's also true with illness. How do you support somebody and how do you understand what's happening? And I said to my grandson, he was just visiting, and his family is divorced. Not my grandson, his best friend's family is divorced. And I said, a question you could ask, because boys don't talk about feelings a whole lot, but it's important, and it's important for your best friend. And so just say, what's the hardest part for you? And you can use that. And I was thinking that's a really good question in this situation.
I love that you said that. And this is something I love to speak about that not a lot of people talk to me about, which is nobody teaches you how to support someone when they're going through a really hard time. There's no language for it. And so oftentimes there's either nothing, and that feels extremely isolating to the person going through the adverse experience, or they say things that they think are supportive that are actually really invalidating and make you feel farther away from them than in the first place. And I wish that there was a manual for how to navigate uncharted territory like that. But what you said, I love so much. I mean, that's such a thoughtful question. And the title of my book's But You Look Fine. So I am used to invalidating statements over the years. I have a whole Word document of what the book could be called. But that said, I had an experience last year where someone I love in my family, my like extended family, asked me a question and said, "So you think this whole time it was Lyme disease?" And I said, "Yes." And she kind of took it in and she walked across the room and she said, "I'm so sorry that you've been through so much pain." And I started weeping.
Yes.
Because
She saw you.
Yeah, and I didn't have to put a mask on to make other people feel more comfortable about what was going on with me, which I had learned very early on that other people were really uncomfortable with me being in pain. And I felt so seen. And she just said that one sentence and looked me right in the eye and was fully present and didn't need me to be anything for her. I gave her the biggest hug. And I've been talking about this as I speak about the book way more than I thought I would, because it really matters. It really matters what you say to someone when they're really struggling. And little boys should be talking about their feelings too.
Yes, they should.
I just read a study that said that boys cry more than girls when they're little.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, when I think about my son when he was 3, my mother, YMI therapist, my mother had a very rare mental illness. And I left my son for 3 days with my mother while I went to train in Cape Cod with some wonderful therapists. And I felt so distracted because I was so worried about what I had done. And when I got there, when I came back, my son, he looked at me and he was just a little kid and he said, "Your mom and dad don't like people much, do they?" And I just laughed with relief and connection. And I said, "That's a great way to put it, buddy." But he didn't say they don't like me. He really could see and understand that it was a very strange dynamic. And I think that seeing, we're also talking about really you being seen and people with chronic illness truly being seen. And that was a mental illness, but it's this, he saw them and he got it and he knew they cared for him as best as they could, and it's we are all so hungry to be accurately seen, and we're just so bad at it because there's so many things going on, I think.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I love that. What did you say again that he should ask him?
What's the hardest part for you right now or today? And because that's a question you can use more often. And I think it gives the other person, and then it also helps them stop and think about where they are at right in this moment and helps them be more present.
I love that so much. I love that.
Oh, good. Put it in your next book.
Okay. Okay.
I was surprised at the statistic in your book. 76% of adult Americans struggle with chronic illness. So let's take a deep dive into medical trauma brain, which is, I think, you coined that term, correct? Yes, I thought so. Could you tell us what that means? I thought it was great. Because it's even when you go to a doctor, because I'm 73 and I haven't been, knock on wood, very much. But I know when something serious comes, I want somebody else there. My husband, if he can hear, I want someone that can pay attention because I know I'm going to be a little shell-shocked. And I think medical trauma brain is different than that. But I think that might be the beginning of it because you're just like trying to digest what's being said.
Yeah, so I coined the phrase because I had been through decades of misdiagnosis and a really intense decade of being acutely sick. And I couldn't get the right answers. I went from very Western-minded physicians to Eastern, landed somewhere in the middle. I had answers, but they weren't clear enough and they they weren't doing enough and I was just treading water, like my baseline had adjusted. And that happens a lot when people have ongoing pervasive illness. It's like you pivot and you pivot and you keep pivoting and you don't even know where the baseline is anymore. But once I went to my 36th doctor, just let that sink in for a second. I packed up my hopes and dreams and went to a doctor after my first book. I wrote my first book for how to thrive with chronic health conditions. And I wrote it for women from a love letter from my heart to help them thrive through challenging experiences. And at that time, the statistic was 50% less than it is today, just 8 years later. So 194 million Americans now suffer with a chronic health condition. And what's interesting to me is that modern medicine is life-saving. And there are incredible doctors. One wrote my foreword, but it's very black and white. And all of these chronic, complex, invisible conditions fall into a gray area that it feels like it puts an extra stress on the patient on top of being sick because you really have to be managing and navigating things on your own. And after I went to my 36th doctor and he correctly diagnosed me and said, I know exactly what's going on. I'm like, you do? And he said, you have late stage neurological Lyme and co-infections. And the hard thing is that we don't know what the damage will be. And the treatments are really hard. But what I do know is that you'll feel like you have a different body. And I believed him. And I felt so validated in that moment that I had trusted myself, that I'd never given up on myself, that I got myself there in the first place. But I also felt a lot of grief. It was almost as if I was watching all of the events with all of the doctors I had seen flash before my eyes. And I trusted him. I felt safe with him, and he empowered me, which is so important and doesn't happen enough. So it can be a very disempowering place to be as a patient within a medical system that doesn't support them.
Absolutely.
So I got better. Like I got so much better. And I thought, oh my God, he's right. I do have a different body. I do feel so much better. I'm like at the end of the tunnel. And then something started to happen that I couldn't explain because I didn't understand and I couldn't find anything out there, which is that I was physically better, but getting physically better gave me space and capacity to feel bad in a new way. It was like my physical body got off the hamster wheel of stress and my mind hadn't gotten the memo. And it wasn't until I went on the worst date ever with my husband and he said to me, I have to talk to you about something that's a little provocative. And I said, what? Like, we're on a date. But I do love that he just tells it to me like it is. I go, what is it? And he said, I've always known that there was going to be another phase of this for you. And I said, what? And he's like, you've been through so much trauma from being sick at a young age. And I always knew that there was going to be another shoe that would drop. There was just too much that you've been through to not have it. And it sent me like reeling because I didn't know what to do with it, but it made sense to me. And so then I started interviewing physicians and saying, hey, like, do you ever see this where a patient is deemed better, but they aren't acting like they are, or that they have what I'm experiencing it, which is like crippling anxiety, hypervigilance, obsessiveness, extreme fear that it's all going to come back at the onset of any symptom. And they'd all say, well, now that you say it, yeah, there is that patient so cavalierly, like there is that patient that gets better, but they don't act as if they're better. They started to think about it when I said it. And then I would say, well, what's the name for this? And nobody knew. It just was like just something that happened. And then I started talking to patients and saying, are any of you experiencing this? Because it's crippling me. Like it literally is debilitating me. And I'm having panic attacks and I'm supposed to be better and I feel horrible. And they would all be like, yes, that's exactly how I feel. So I talked to hundreds of patients. And when I said it, it was like a light bulb went off. One of them had hemiplegic migraines, and she said, I don't, I realized that I don't have migraines anymore. But at the onset of any aura or symptom that could cause one, I'm laying on the couch with an Advil in a dark room, like that.
Yeah.
So it made me start to really dive into research, which you'll appreciate, because it wasn't post-traumatic stress.
No.
Because that's when it's one single external event with a capital T trauma. And then complex post-traumatic stress disorder is when the event happens over and over. So that felt more like it. However, this is different because the threat is your body. Because after you've been through a war in your body, you no longer feel safe in it. And so I said, I have to name this for the 194 million Americans. That's not even including cancer patients who were in remission, people who had acute illness like stroke or a terrible accident. There's this in between sick and well that feels like a limbo. And to me, it's a place that I call the Shadowlands, where it was like I was out to dinner having tapas with my friends, but my brain was somewhere else entirely. Like it was stuck in a sandstorm desert, locked, or the upside down world in Stranger Things for anybody who's a fan. That's what it felt like. And so I was like existing between two worlds. And I just made it my mission to write this book about what medical trauma brain is, how it feels in your body, and how to break free from it. Because I truly believe that if you don't address this illness after an illness, you will never be free, because you'll always feel like you have a ghost right behind you, and you will always feel terrified that it's going to come back. And I think this is completely essential. Like, I don't know how we live in a country that in medicine sees the physical body as separate from the rest of us. It is mind, body, spirit. There is no disconnection anyway. And so there's a silent expectation that, well, you're physically better, so what's the problem? Get back on the horse. The horse is gone. It left a long time ago. Everything's different. How would you not be affected in such a profound way? I mean, that expectation of just move on is insane.
Yes.
What do you think?
I agree. And I think there are so many problems in our culture today, and that's just one more, that is very real and affects a huge number of people. And I think you're labeling it that's always to me the beginning. It's like having people identify their feelings, being able to just identify feelings. So you giving it a name gives it a little more cachet, and hopefully medical people will also begin to understand it.
Well, that's what I really hope. I hope that after this comes out, there are case studies, there is real research put into it, because I know this. I lived this. There's no denying it. And all of the people that I've talked to feel so validated by me saying it out loud for the first time. Because when you struggle with something that doesn't have a name, it doesn't have language, it doesn't have solutions, you literally feel like you're in a prison inside of your brain, and you're so isolated. Like, it's even more isolated than wearing a mask, because you're so alone in your experience, and you feel so afraid in this case with MTB.
Yes. I think it makes a lot of sense. Describe the shadowlands that folks with chronic illness experience.
Well, it's like what I was saying before. I named it the Shadowlands because that is what MTB, which is the imprint left on your brain after your body has navigated through a serious illness. The Shadowlands, it's like the imprint never lets you get over the illness because you're not safe in your body. And the Shadowlands is the feeling of what that feels like, which to me was like, I should have been happy that there were so many things I could do that I couldn't do before. And like this example of dinner with my friends, I would be with my friends and I'd be laughing and I'd love them so much and I would be connected to them, but there was a part of me that wasn't there because it was still in survival stress. And I didn't have language for it. So while I was with the people I love the most in the world, I was completely separate. And this can look different for a lot of different people. I interviewed a lot of patients to ask them what it feels like to them. For one of them, she hadn't had a drink in 10 years, and it wasn't because she wanted to be sober. It was because she was so sick. She couldn't
Yeah.
do things that her friends were doing. And she shared, this is my first drink in 10 years. And they were all like, woo woo. And she was like, okay, but I've been through so much, and there was no recognition of that. And so she felt so isolated in it. And then the other example I shared was with this hemiplegic migraine sufferer. She's like, I literally used to feel like a piece of furniture with people walking around me. And now I realize that I really don't have migraines that often, except I relate to myself as someone who has hemiplegic migraines.
Yes.
So in those different examples I'm sharing, like it could feel like dissociation, it could feel like anxiety, but it's really just, it almost feels like you're not really there.
Tell me about the resilience trap, which I thought was a really important idea.
I love that you're asking such amazing questions and they're so thoughtful. An adverse experience, one, requires a lot of resilience. And that can be both empowering and also become toxic when you're dealing with chronic illness. And I want to say that our culture prizes resilience and pushing through and achieving and moving through things quickly and getting to the next thing and achieving more and working hard and not stopping and not processing and just going and achieving and making money. And, like there's this expectation that we be resilient, and that means that we're strong. And in a lot of cases, that's true. But true resilience to me means being able to be with yourself no matter what you're going through. And when you become a patient and you're navigating uncharted waters, you go right into resilience and right into survival stress. And that's part of how you survive a very difficult experience. However, when the experience doesn't end and it's ongoing or it's traumatizing, you get stuck in survival mode. You literally can't get out of survival stress. It rewires your brain. And you then are operating from a place of chronic resilience, which I think is actually detrimental unless you are willing to do the work after the illness to rewire your brain again. What do you think about that?
It makes a lot of sense to me. I'm a Gestalt person, so I'm always thinking in dualities. What is the opposite of resilience to you?
That's a great question. Maybe complacency? No, because I think you can be resilient and have acceptance at the same time. That's a duality. What do you think is the opposite?
I think I was thinking vulnerable. Resilience is survival. The opposite is exposure.
Yeah, I think that's true. I like that.
Exposure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I like about thinking in duality is it takes time to find the right word. I love precision with trying to sort that out. But yeah, exposure. If you're not letting people see you, and because you're supposed to keep going.
I'm just thinking that I have an example in the book where I talk about this guy, Joe Schmo, and it's like you can have really heinous interactions with the medical system or with a loved one. and where you feel totally invalidated, and yet you need that person. So while you're going through this emergency, all of this shitty stuff happens and you just shelve it for later because there's no time. You have to get what you need. You'll just deal with it later, deal with it later, deal with it later. And because you're in this survival state, you can't always feel all the pain of the things that are happening to you psychically and mentally and emotionally while you are physically trying to push towards surviving. And so I think that I feel it almost becomes hard to be both at the same time when you are in an emergency. And not many people are saying to patients, hey, this will be traumatic. So if you get ahead of it now and you start to work with trauma therapists, it might be easier at the end for you. I mean, there's like literally no connection between the two. So I'm really urging people to not do as I did, but do as I'm urging you to do, which is take this part of healing incredibly serious, because you'll never be free if you don't face it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do. Would you talk about the process of loss? And I think that everything in life is about learning to face loss. I think that's what death is about. I think that it's such an important thing to work with loss. And that's part of chronic illness. And how can partners be helpful in this process of loss?
There is a huge component of grief when you're facing this kind of ambiguous loss, where people in society think of a death of a loved one or death of an animal or something like that. That's quantifiable. But when a patient gets thrust into this crazy medical maze and they're fighting for their life, and then it lasts for a long period of time, it robs you of the life that you dreamed of. Like for me, I was so clear from age 5 on I was an actor. That's all I was ever going to be. I went to school for it. I was singularly focused. I started professionally acting, and then I went to Israel, ate something, and got so sick I became a patient. So my life just changed, like so dramatically. And I kept, like I said to you before, saying, I'll get back to it. I'll get back to it. That was then, this is now, I'll get right back to it. But it was literally like I blinked and all of a sudden I was 41. And the last time I remember, I was 25. So I literally felt like, oh my God, where has my life gone? Because I've had to be so focused on getting answers and getting healthy. And I lost so much of my life. And there's a really key balance to strike where you're processing the grief of who you once were with the dreams of who you thought you'd become. And for me personally, one of the hardest parts of it was that I was like, where did my life go? And all of these things in my life, like if I wanted to become a mother, or if I wanted to do all of these things, I didn't have capacity for. And now maybe it's going to look different than I thought it would, and maybe everything will be different. And it's not even about that it might be different. It's that I didn't have the choice to do it how I wanted it, when I wanted it. And that was really hard for me to grapple with. But what I realized is that just because my life looks dramatically different than how I thought it was, doesn't mean that it's all not my life. Doesn't mean that all parts of me from before this horrible experience don't come along for the ride. I mean, I'm literally now integrating things that I used to love to do back into my life. And there are blessings in it. Like if I didn't get sick, I would never have channeled my creative energy into writing. I would never have met so many people who have read my books, who've really benefited from them. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm proud of myself for taking a really hard experience and making my pain a purpose. And then you said something about having a partner. I love this. Nobody talks about this, or not enough. And I've been with my partner since I was 25 years old. So he's been with me through everything. And he and I have both been through adversity in our life. And it's not different from any kind of other extreme adversity in the way that it's just different in that most people don't go through it so young. So in a way, it brought us a lot closer together. I mean, we really deeply bonded because we both were in hard experiences at different times. And I just think it happened earlier to us than it does to most people. Everyone at some point in their life will go through something extremely challenging, and we just both went through ours in our 20s and 30s. And we've worked really hard, because here's what I think, and I'm so curious what your perspective is on this. But when he fell in love with me, it had nothing to do with what I was going through with my health. It was all the qualities about me as a human being. And same for me with him. And so where there's a trap often, I feel, is that a lot of people who are the ones that are sick make it their entire life, including their relationship. And what we found to be really helpful, and we've worked really hard through really hard stuff, it's like you have to be able to recognize that you are not your illness, and that there is a huge, beautiful part of you that has nothing to do with the challenge that you're going through, and creating boundaries around when you talk about it and when you really go through the tough stuff, which is incredibly important to stay connected. You have to be present with each other outside of this all-encompassing
illness
experience.
Appointments and doctors and medicine. And yes, I like that idea that you've got to have a life outside and separate with each other.
Yeah. What do you think?
I like that. I was thinking when I asked the question, to me, the communication, just the way he helped you on that date by saying, I think there's another thing going on here. You're better physically, but there's something else happening. That insight really helped you see yourself. And I really believe that relationships are about helping each other see yourself more accurately. And because the people I trained with would say all the time, you can't know yourself by yourself. You need to see yourself with other people. And that communication is so important. And then getting it right, being willing to get it right. If you see something that it's not, and you say, gee, I think you're grumpy today, and you say, no, I'm really not feeling grumpy. I'm really just feeling a little detached. That's kind of interesting. I'm not sure why or whatever. I'm making that up. But being able to really go back and forth and feel that connection.
Yeah. I so agree and resonate with that in every way. And also, like, if you're the person that's going through the health crisis that's listening, it's also really important that you check on them.
Yes.
Because
what's the hardest part of this for you? Yes.
Yeah, because it's so hard to watch someone you deeply love struggle in a way that you can't fix.
Yes, that's right.
And so it puts a tremendous grief and burden on them. And it's just to remember that it's not all about your own experience. It affects everyone who loves you. And your partner it's all about communication. And I really think that boundaries around the illness talk are essential. And that's like, if you're at your sickest and all you can do is watch a movie and hold hands, that can still be a date. That can still be quality time. You just have to stop talking about the struggle and be together.
Yes, that's right. Right. It can't all, it's kind of like, I'm 73. It's kind of like you don't want to just be with aging friends that only talk about their doctor appointments. It's the same thing. You know, to talk about some of it, sure, I want to be there for you. I want to know what's going on. But you also want to have another piece to it that makes you feel connected.
Yes.
There's lots of ways, and I like that not just being connected through the illness is what you're saying, being connected in other ways.
It's essential.
Yeah.
I mean, it has been for my marriage.
Yeah, I think that's true. I do.
And also, you know, that's not just for partners, that's also for friends.
Yes, I agree. Yes.
You know, I have a very, very close friend, and when we were young, we used to like go to parties together and just kind of get wild together. And then I got sick in my late 20s, and I was like, oh my God, what do I do? And I had a really hard conversation with him because I had a lot of friends disappear that I thought were my friends. And that was very painful. However, now I realize it opened the door for really amazing friendships that I have that I wouldn't have had space for otherwise. But I love him so much. And I said, listen, like, I don't want to lose this thread that we have between us, and I am struggling, and you know that, and I know that, and it's really hard to, one, be young and be going through this, and it must be really hard to have a friend who's young who's going through this. Like, how can we stay connected? And we figured it out, and then we had a date where we would go see a play or something like once a month, and that was our way of just pivoting the experience into what we could do then. And he's still one of my best friends to this day. But had I not had that conversation,
That's right.
I would have felt isolated.
That's right. I think we keep secret too many feelings that we need to put on the table to explore together with somebody else. And we act as if, well, if I don't talk about it, I'm not burdening you, and I don't know what to say, or I don't know how to put it. There's a million excuses. But be awkward and just stumble around and try to be truthful, you know?
Just be awkward.
Let the uncertainty.
Be awkward and honest.
Yes, awkwardly honest. That's absolutely right. Yep, I agree. So, how does identity shift the impact of attraction, intimacy, and communication in chronic illness? We've touched on the communication a little bit, but I think the attraction and intimacy point is one we need to talk about. Because maybe you don't feel like it a whole lot.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. And I've talked to a lot of people about this experience too, because it's hard to feel sexy and good in your body if you're sick or you're struggling. I mean, or you feel disconnected from yourself, you know? And I just think that having those honest conversations, and also making sure that you're asking what does your partner need to feel loved and like taken care of by you? Because it's not just about your experience. It's about having a really amazing opportunity to grow a real intimacy between two people emotionally by constantly checking in and making sure what each other needs and where you're at, and having those awkward conversations. You know, it's a really important part of a relationship, and it has to be talked about. It has to be on the table. The romance part of it has to be on the table, and it can be really hard to talk about those things,
Yeah.
or not feel shame about them. I'm curious what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think as I was listening to you, I was thinking there's also a little bit maybe an exchange for a while. And if people think of it as a sacrifice or an exchange, that you give up physical intimacy, but you create a bedrock foundation of intimacy in other ways. And then when the person feels better, that physical intimacy can return. That it's not, it's And I was also thinking about, because I just interviewed somebody yesterday about sex, and she talked, and nobody's ever talked about this before, but I was thinking, if you're really sick, the idea of giving more or receiving might just be not within your bandwidth, depending on what, maybe you just had radiation for cancer, or the Lyme disease hit a new horrible place. It's really something that it's a gray, messy area, but the honesty is what's going to get you through. And that intimacy from the honesty makes the less sex work better. That's the best way I can say it.
Yeah. And also, and at the same time, it is important to figure out what does feel good.
Absolutely.
And figure out how to make it work for each other, I mean, you feel like your body's been taken over by this like monster, but at the same time, like, you need affection and love, and those things are really important in a relationship.
Experimenting with it in a way that works for both of you, and being able to describe that and talk about it, because it's going. My point was, it's going to change. Everything keeps changing, and so the more you can keep talking about it and experimenting, and think of it as experimenting, playing with ideas and seeing how it feels.
And also just remembering, like, for both partners to remember that even if someone is going through radiation and they could not feel worse, like, it's temporary, hopefully.
Right.
And I think people get very mired to this idea of, like, it's always going to be like this. But everything's changing all the time. And everything's fluid and everything's on a spectrum. So just because if there's a hard moment or a moment where you're not feeling physically intimate with somebody, that doesn't mean it couldn't change in a few days. And I think that can be really challenging for people, this idea of like uncertainty.
Uncertainty is I think uncertainty is what life is all about, and yet we cling to the 1 in 10 thinking black and white, right and wrong, and the messy middle, I call it, the 4, 5, 6, and 7, the gray. The messy middle is so uncertain, but that's where we live. I mean, it's fun to watch The Pit, I'm from Pittsburgh, and see Dr. Robbie making these quick decisions that save people's lives, And then you also see the mistakes that happen and how people are traumatized from the mistakes they made in the ER. And I think we want that Dr. Robbie certainty, but that's not, you saw 36 doctors before. Your 36th doctor had some certainty. And I learned from House that diagnosis is a very tricky business. I did learn that. I was like, I think I always was a little in awe of doctors, and then House kind of cured me of that. And I recognize that it's confusing. It's mysterious. We do make mistakes. Some people diagnose people mental health-wise too quickly. Some people don't figure out anything about what that means. So I think there's such a messiness to the whole thing that we have to embrace.
Mm-hmm. And understanding that everything ebbs and flows, especially in a relationship.
Yes. Yep.
Like,
absolutely. That's why we like watching the ocean, back and forth, back and forth. That's what happens.
I love that. That's so true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're good.
So, another important point you make is that, quote, doctors would say all kinds of things to invalidate your experiences. And you touched on that earlier, but I think it's worth spending. That created the, quote, oh so deep wound of questioning yourself. Would you share your perspective on that, and what can partners do to help minimize the effects of this? Because I think I did not find a doctor I trusted, just a GP, my yearly check-in thing, until I was probably 65. And it's because my doctor moved up into administration. And I absolutely knew he wasn't listening and paying attention. And I think it's easy for us to also dismiss ourselves. And so I thought this was really important because you do know your body and what's happening. So would you talk about that?
Yeah. So what happened to me is another thing that I'm urging people not to do, which is accept shitty behavior. I if you are getting yourself to a doctor because there feels like there's a problem, there is, period, bar none. Nobody knows your body better than you do. Nobody ever will, and nobody will care more about you getting better than you. That's it. So losing that thread, that has to be your mantra, is I know my body better than anyone. And I went in like that, and I came out like that at the end when I wrote the book. However, in the middle, there was a lot of gray, murky behavior that normally in my life I would have never really ever accepted. But because I was a patient and I needed help, I accepted and tolerated and swallowed a lot of really shitty behavior that was very invalidating, like, but you look fine. There was a lot of silent messaging, or do you need a Xanax? Or I don't know, just like take it out. It doesn't spark joy. I mean, like really crazy things that people said that you're like, at the time, you're like, what? Okay, I'll deal with it later. Got to get to the next, got to do whatever I've got to do. And when I was researching for this book, I interviewed the incredible Dr. Gabor Mate, and he was talking about attachment versus authenticity. And what I found so fascinating is that when we're young, and you know this, when something happens and you need your parents' help or your caregiver's help, you, even if you know it's wrong or it invalidates your experience, you often choose attachment because you need them to survive. And unfortunately, this gets really transferred into the doctor's office. You need them to help you. But what patients forget is that 80% of what you do for your health and your well-being is all outside of the doctor's office. So there is so much that you can do to help yourself live and feel well that doesn't involve going to the doctor. The other part is not tolerating bad behavior. I mean, would you just marry the first person you ever went on a date with? Probably not. It's not dissimilar from that. You're literally looking for a partner in your health who is going to match the needs that you feel are important to you. So my list might be different from yours and might be different from my husband's, but you have to get really clear with yourself. Like, what do I need to feel safe in a relationship with a doctor and to feel like I'm getting the right care? And you have the liberty to do that. Nobody ever told you you couldn't. We just have this thing with doctors, like doctor knows best. And the most important thing that I hope to achieve with this new book, with But You Look Fine, is to validate a patient's experience and to say, I believe you. Because there's so much nuance when you look okay and your, let's say, basic labs look okay, but you know something's wrong and you're going to someone who doesn't have the capability to look into things further and see the interconnectedness of all of the issues going on. That just feels so demeaning and invalidating. And that's really detrimental. I had a lot of experiences that made me start to question myself because I was told over and over again with words and with not, but you look fine, which means you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. So I want to go back to the partners support stuff. And I really thought this was an important point in your book, that partners often can overcompensate or pull away. And what's your advice around that dynamic? Because those are two extremes, and we've talked about how the secret to life is the messy middle. What is it between those two that works from your point of view? Works better. I'm not going to say works like it's absolute.
With partners around illness, you're saying?
Yes.
I think it's really important that the patient take full responsibility that this is something that they are individually going through and it is theirs to journey through. And it's important for the caretaker or the partner to recognize this isn't my journey. Like, I can be here to support them through the thing that they're suffering through, and I will be as supportive as possible, but this is not mine to bear solely, because that's not healthy for them. You don't want them to do that, and you also won't get all of the incredible life lessons that happen from going through an adverse experience if you're being shielded by somebody else trying to handle the load for you. It also is not good for a relationship. It's not healthy. And I would just say that a lot of times people don't have really good communication skills. Like, we're not really taught how to talk deeply and intimately with each other in general, unless you go to therapy or you're like a huge fan of therapy, which, by the way, I think every person in the United States and the world should be in therapy all the time. It's like the healthiest thing I could ever think of. So just PS. But I think if you feel your partner pulling away, it depends what stage of a relationship you're in. I mean, if you're in the very beginning, maybe that's a sign. But if it's later or if it's nuanced and you're very in love with the person that you're with and you know that they're struggling through it, getting help is really important so that you can learn how to talk to each other, because everybody's different. I mean, I was just listening to a comedy show where Wanda.
Oh, yeah. I know who you mean.
She was saying,
yes.
She was saying, Wanda Sykes, she was saying that who I love, she was saying that her wife will be like, you haven't come over and kissed me today. And she's like, I'm right here. Come over and kiss me. Like, I'll give you a kiss. Or she'll be like, you haven't told me you love me today. And Wanda's like, if you wanted affection from me, come over here. But we all have my point of telling you this story is that we all have different needs and different ways of feeling loved. And they're different. And if you don't learn about each other and how you experience love, then you will feel disconnected. It's going through something like this is such a gift because it allows you to go so deep with someone and know them so well and be there for them and like really have such an enriched, beautiful, deep, unwavering love for each other if you learn how to handle it. But you need help for that, and it takes constant work. It's like every day, I choose you. Every day, I choose you today. Today, I choose you. And it starts there. What would you add to what would you add to it?
No, I think that's really good. I was thinking about The Pit and Becca and her.
I guess I need to watch this show.
Oh, it's a wonderful show. It's on HBO. But she's a resident, and she's very wrapped up in her mentally challenged sister's life. And it turns out the sister has a urinary tract infection because she's been having sex. And the doctor sister cannot accept that her sister has been in a sexual relationship and she did not know about it. And clearly she's overcompensating and she's controlling and she wants to know, who is this guy, and the place you live should have told me you have a boyfriend. And it's like, whoa, because the sister is an adult and she is making adult decisions. And her life has been so defined by taking care of her sister that she's lost track of herself. So my advice would be, and as a caretaker, don't lose track of you.
Yes, you know what? It's so funny because I was preparing for this and I asked my husband if he would add anything to what I was going to say. And he said just that the partner of the person who's struggling, don't forget that you have a life outside of this, and don't forget that you need support too, and that you need outlets other than your partner. I mean, I think that goes for anyone, and that goes for the patient too. Like you need to have other support besides your partner.
And you talked about that also when you said, and it's your journey. And I like that differentiation because that's what keeps intimacy. When you've each got an individual sense of self that then connects in lots of different ways. And I think that is the richness and the depth that you're talking about, where illness can be a gift because of the depth.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Okay, now it's time to remind folks the title of your newest book and your previous book and website and anything else you want them to know.
But You Look Fine. This was not planned. It was just literally sitting right there. But You Look Fine, Trapped in the Help Between Sick and Well and How to Break Free, in bookstores, anywhere books are sold, June 9th. You can find me on amykurtz.com or on Instagram _amykurtz.com. And I just created a really fun quiz that is about how to identify what kind of a patient you are, that I think would be really interesting in learning about yourself.
Yeah, I think that's really cool.
I'll send it to you.
So basically, love is not canceled just because life hands you prescription bottles, heating pads, insurance paperwork, and emotional meltdowns before dinner. Relationships with chronic illness may require more flexibility, patience, and communication, but honestly, so does assembling IKEA furniture together. Thank you for being here with us today, and if this episode helped you feel a little less alone, make sure you subscribe, share, and come back for the next conversation.
Thank you for listening to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't. If you have enjoyed the show, please leave a rating and review on iTunes and help get the word out. To learn more or connect with Rhoda, visit therapyideas.net.